As some of you should well know, I'm a fan of what Justin Sledge has been up to. Wealth of knowledge. It's kind of him to do what he does. I'm sure he's making some money off of it. He's a neat guy. It's entertaining, and yeah, he provides people with information. There's a number of things he's going to rattle off in this video. For some reason, I'm a little out of breath, and I apologize for that. What was it? I'm trying to keep my thoughts straight because I haven't eaten yet today. In a minute, he's going to tell you that child sacrifice ended, which is a laughable joke. And most people will probably believe what he says. Here.
Mention of Isaac. Many scholars, both secular and religious, have noticed this very odd element of the tale and have made the obvious conclusion. We're probably looking at what is the earlier ending of the story, in which Isaac, in that earlier version, was actually sacrificed, with the whole angelic intervention and animal substitution, a later theological sanitized version, interpolated into the story. Even many Jewish religious commentators conclude that something similar had to have occurred, with the story ultimately taking on radical, mystical, and esoteric elements when it eventually becomes the subject of Kabbalistic speculation. Now, if you want to get more into the idea that Isaac really was sacrificed in the earlier version of that, you got to check out Levinson's classic book, The Death and Resurrection of the Beloved Son. Now, I said that Israelite child sacrifice came to an end following the reforms of Josiah and the Babylonian exile. And that seems true, it seems, aside from the most important act of child sacrifice in all of Israelite history. Recall...
It's horse shit. It's absolute horse shit if you use your brain. There's also nothing but proof. But most people aren't going to think about this shit. Most people aren't going to put in time doing that. Right now, I'm leafing through a book. It's one of many examples. It's the one I usually will spoon feed the internet, and I've left it online a lot, and most people haven't seen the fucking video. Or videos, pardon me, because I've done this many times over. What else was it in here? He rattles off something else. There was a couple points, like I said, I wanted to call attention to. Oh, well, here, we'll have to flash forward on the video. It has to do with the Iesis, which I babble about, and people don't apparently understand, which is one of the many reasons you'll hear people call it the Jesus. Simple way to appreciate what I just said. If that thing is very fucking important, and, you know, words have power, which means names have power, people wouldn't be calling it the Jesus. Because J didn't exist, that's one reason, and there's plenty of others, but most people haven't figured that shit out. I don't feel like reading all of this, nor should I have to, based on the lack of participation and the fact that the internet doesn't show what I leave online to people, typically speaking. Take a screenshot, read the words. Here. Some of this. Take a screenshot, read the words. I'm trying to hold it steady. There's another one. Does it keep going into this? I think it does. One more second. Roughly enough. Wrote 3rd century. There's no one claiming, you know, it was abolished. Here, I'll do this so you get the whole page. In other words, we are told that this shit was abolished, but what happened, technically what happened was, it was no longer, public knowledge, so to speak, but it also was not public. It went underground, physically and metaphorically. It became a private practice. To prove that point, all you gotta do, okay, maybe it doesn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, because I do want you to take this with many, many grains of salt. But it is right in our fucking face. Think about the people who are pulling our strings. Who are they? Some of you might know superficial shit, and some of those superficial shits do attend these things. And what are they doing? They're using the same fucking icons. They're using the same deities. Mind you, it's been corrupted and purposely bent so that you don't understand what's what. Ironically, it has to do with the name associated with the Justin Sledge video. Because it too has to do with that Isis that I was talking about. But people don't understand these things, let alone a connection between these two things. And they're, typically speaking, I know I complain about this, but it's because you and I are surrounded by fucking morons. That's why everything is a shit show. If people looked into this stuff, they would understand this stuff. But they don't look into this stuff and think about this stuff and reason things out and challenge what they're being spoon-fed. They don't. But if they did, they'd see a glaring connection. They'd realize that the people who are pulling our strings are getting up to these very rituals that allegedly died off a long time ago. For you borderline brain dead motherfuckers out there, what does that tell you about our masters? And don't fool yourself, you and I have masters. Think of it this way. Does the Bilderberg Group exist? Does the Davos panel exist? If so, they're both telling you something. The Davos panel is the superficial shit, where you are quite literally told what they're doing. You've heard things along these lines. Consider this tangent cam for a moment. Think of the Davos panel being superficial, in your face, something that you do have access to, but most people are fucking dumb, and they don't use this as a tool. Moreover, more people aren't banding together to see that this is done. Dead and done. This still exists. In other words, you're looking at one hand while the other hand is doing something. That's how this shit works. That's why this shit works. And people aren't invested, which means this still exists, which means it still works. If you and I put in the time and we got rid of the Davos panel, we could attack the fucking Bilderberg Group and do away with that shit. But nobody's doing that. That's why this shit still exists. For fuck's sake. Which also reaffirms what I'm complaining about to begin with. This is another point that should come up. 2023, I complained a lot during July because FedNow was rolled out on the 1st. WorldCoin began digitally testing as of the 24th of July, 2023. And during that month, a bunch of fucking Muppets, retards, they whined about a film which finances human trafficking, otherwise known as The Sound of Freemasons, The Sound of Freedom. But none of these kids, none of them brought up the Davos panel, none of them brought up the Bilderberg Group, none of them brought up any of this shit, none of them brought up true examples of fucking child sacrifice related to the people who are pulling our fucking strings. Food for thought. Currently, they're creating a fucking campaign to war against people such as myself. They're doing away with the last death throes of whatever you could think of in terms of freedom of speech. And this is across the board, across the realm. Most morons call the world. What are the odds of all of these corporations, which people call countries superficially, buying into the same fucking narrative and rolling out sanctions? Verbal, monetary, and or throwing your fucking ass in a jail. For doing what? Talking about shit that reflects reality and urging other people to pull their heads out of their fucking asshole. And that's what the Davos panel is doing right now. The same people who walk hand in hand with the Bilderberg Group. Both of which perform mock sacrifices. Mock, mind you, which is fucking horse shit. It's superficial shit. It's double speak. You're being told something, most superficial people are going to buy into it. That's what they're going to repeat. That's what they're going to assume, and they're going to jerk each other off in the circle jerk that is the truth community. That's how this shit works, because people are dumb. They're just fucking stupid. Both of these groups exist. And it reaffirms the fact that sacrifice, these sacrifices that I'm referring to and Justin Sledge spoke about, they still fucking exist. They never went away. They never fucking went away. And there's nothing but proof of this if you go looking. And shit you not, but how many people are going to put in the time and do that? Most people are going to punch something into Google. Google's not going to show you a fucking thing, and or it's going to tell you that that's not true. And people are going to repeat that. Because again, most people are fucking retards and they're not worth their salt. They're fucking us up. That's why things are bad and that's why things are getting worse. People could change this because most of these fucking retards are good people deep down. They're just gullible and they've never considered the fact that they have to challenge themselves. Consider this another episode of Tangent Cam. I want you to think about this, first of all. Positive vibes only. Pretty sure I said it. Positive vibes only. There we go. And of course, it brought up a superficial song. It didn't bring up the social engineering campaign because Google is a tool of propaganda. This isn't relevant, in other words. That's a whole nother fucking ball of wax. So usually I'll bring this up and I'll talk about censorship, which is relevant to what I already brought up, but that's not the only thing I want you to think about. What I want you to think about is all the time and energy all of these retards who are shopping around polarizing positive vibes only, expend. In doing our master's bidding, essentially. Working as an agent, if you think of The Matrix from 1999, think about all the time and energy they put into policing the internet for our masters. Making sure that no bad words were said. You can't hear anything having to do with, the thumbs down option on YouTube, so to speak. It's another way you could think in terms of this. Because that's another clear example of censorship. And polarizing censorship, mind you. Polarizing horse shit. So if people weren't wasting their fucking time and energy policing the internet, doing this crap, pushing something that isn't how reality works. You don't get to choose a sunset or a sunrise. You experience both every 24 hours, crudely speaking, because that's how things work. If people were using that time and energy to urge others, mind you, including themselves, to pull their heads out of their ass, to challenge themselves and challenge others by example and by degrees, things would be better. But they're not. Instead, people have bought into this, which is promoting a disharmonious system. It's ironic. Not to mention, I've also asked people some questions having to do with negative and positive, just to see what people think. Because what you have been spoon-fed is upside down, backwards, and twisted inside out. People do not fucking have a clue. Sometimes I joke around that people don't know which way's up or down. People don't understand which way's north and south. Same applies to people don't understand the difference between eternity and infinity. They sure as shit don't know what positive and negative truly mean and how they factor into how reality works. Because they've been spoon-fed a pack of lies and they were too superficial and stupid, so they bought into it and that's what they repeat. I'll give you another example. Here's a visual aid. So this is on the internet. And yuppies probably would love this shit. So essentially you're building an elaborate game of mousetrap, in your survival situation to turn that spit with some meat on it. It's essentially a Rube Goldberg machine. This is no different than the polarizing positive vibes only. You're wasting your time and energy when you could sit, relax next to the fire, recoup your energy, and turn the fucking stick. But instead, you're building this apparatus, which is attributed to Da Vinci, allegedly. I don't know if that's true or not, but just the same. In a survival situation, I highly doubt that you're going to take the time to do that. It's fucking retarded. Which means, if you do challenge yourself, then you would have the ability to challenge others. You'd have the ability to, the knowledge base. You'd have something to stand on, so to speak. You'd have a foundation to work with. Which means then you could challenge these narratives, these adult fairy tales that are being dangled in front of us and people are buying into. You and I are being spoon-fed bullshit. That's why we have a feed. And I've complained about all that shit one too many times. Hopefully what I just said gets a point across. There are quite a few in here, but you'd have to reason things out. You'd have to think for yourself. You'd have to put in the fucking time. You'd have to be worth your salt and give two shits. But most people just hear me complaining online and tune the fuck out. I didn't give you a link. I didn't spoon feed you all this shit. I'm urging you to fucking, I don't know why I'm counting down, but I'm urging you to put in the fucking legwork. I want you to think about this. The point is to be invested. If not, you're not involved, which means you're just one of the fucking idiots out there. And most of those idiots out there are going to assume otherwise. Oh, you don't know anything then. You didn't tell me what to repeat. Ironic, if you think about it. Seminar 2 has to do with what? Most of you probably can't answer this question. Misconceptions, mumbo jumbo, mistranslations, shit of that ilk, or along those lines. So I've mentioned this numerous times over, and part of the reason I keep mentioning this is for you guys to connect the fucking dots. To date, I've said this probably technically I was talking about this prior to me pulling my head out of my ass, but for at least a good 8 years, if not the entire 10 years, and nobody has picked up what I'm putting down. They haven't looked into it enough to reason out what I'm driving at, because I didn't spell it out for them. And they can't find it in a Google search. A superficial Google search. And that's worse than ever before. So if they had tried to do it a long time ago, they would have had a better chance of accomplishing the goal. Here we go again. Bilderberg Group. Mollech. You've heard of this garbage? I didn't mean to click on it. 1 second. Go back. Shitty Wikipedia. Let's do it this way. Oh, it didn't do it. Here, we'll do it this way. Bilderberg Group owl statue. Gotta dumb things down, apparently, for Google. There we go. So that stuff, right? It's a superficial version of what we're talking about. It's in place to befuddle people and make them think of something that is something else. That's a shitty way to put it. Pardon me, I'm getting dressed and trying to go do a bunch of shit and get food so that I can finally eat today. That's my excuse. Either way, I'm being lazy with my words and my delivery because I'm pretty fucking fed up. Some of you guys probably gathered as much, or at least you should have. By design, it shouldn't be this difficult to get through to people. And this is prior to me being systematically censored in so many fucking ways. It would make your head spin if you had to deal with it, but most people won't have to deal with it because they're doing exactly what our masters want. Just consider all the kids out there, in the truth community and otherwise, who are shopping around superficial shit, jerking each other off. They don't understand a fucking thing. They're not looking into things. They're not thinking about what's being spoon-fed to them on the fucking internet. Which means they don't understand anything, and by extension, that means they don't mean well. Because they're not fucking trying. They have not begun the fucking journey. How many times can I say fuck as usual? See, most of you out there who have seen this before should know where this goes. Bohemian Grove Buddha statue. Most of you out there who have heard me whine about this should understand where this goes. This is Isis. And this is a bargain bin version of it, mind you. It's not as plump and jolly as some of the other characterizations of it, the iterations of it. Because Buddha is gaunt and creepy, and it's gnawing on the roots of the tree of life. It's not a good thing. But this leads back to what Justin Sledge ironically says later in the video, which I'll splice in now, in case some of you thought, well, what the fuck, he's getting off point. He's jumping all over the place, and it's hard for me to keep up because I don't got a fucking attention span.
Israelite child sacrifice over and against this very pronouncement of Yahweh via the prophet Micah. Here, the suffering and execution of Jesus via crucifixion, let's be honest, an act of divine child sacrifice of the firstborn son acts as a final conclusive atonement to redeem human beings from their eternal damnation for the sin they've inherited from Adam. Jesus is both the high priest holding the knife and the lamb to be slaughtered.
Because of what? You guys should be able to answer this. What is the Isis? How does it function? And you should apply what I'm saying right now to every single one of the fucking wandering stars. But have any of you thought about doing that? Well, I shouldn't have to spell this stuff out. I'm giving you tools. You have to use them. I know it's condescending, but I can keep doing this and another 10 years can pass and people won't think about what I fucking said. A lot of people won't fucking see what I fucking left online or what I put in books, etc., etc. And it just means I'm spinning my wheels. People are digesting the latest content and it's not benefiting us. Because people aren't doing the right fucking thing. Isis, the Jesus, the Mercury, Hermes, Dionysus, Bacchus, Anubis. It's got a lot of fucking names. It is hermaphroditic, which means it's AC/DC, which means it's both sides. In a way, that's why it has to do with the Alpha and the Omega. That's why Justin Sledge is telling you, ironically, as it were, that Jesus is both, the dagger, the sacrificial blade, and the lamb. I'm not sure where it was in here anymore, but at some point he also will tell you that the ancients, and keep in mind, the names of these deities have purposely been, I think of it almost like, have you ever seen an exploded view of a car engine? It's similar to that. It's like a system tree. You see this when you start breaking down etymology. The same thing applies to how many fucking names these things have been given. You should also think of how is the devil typically, referenced? How is it referenced? It's usually said to have a bunch of names. It has many names. This applies to all of the wandering stars. This applies to these principalities that govern you and I. It's a big fucking deal. So somewhere in this video, he's going to tell you that some sources claimed, that these people, they were sacrificing the kiddos to, obviously, Moloch. That's one way it's dressed up, but more specifically to Yah, or he'll say Yahweh. And keep in mind, those are likely corruptions of that name, if you look into it. Most people don't. And yet, we do have what? You can use a browser called Yahoo. It's our masters laughing at us, but people don't understand these things because they're superficial as they fucking come. So back to point. And for all intents and purposes, I'm referring to it as Yah, or Yahweh in this case. So if you watch this video, you can see and hear what I'm talking about. So he says some sources claim it was the Yah or the Yahweh. Others claim that these children were being sacrificed to Baal. I usually say Baal el Allah, but most people haven't figured out what I'm driving at with that either. And I'm not going to spell that out for you, even though I've called attention to aspects of it, and people still haven't said, oh my God, dude, I figured something out based on what you said because I've been thinking with my brain. I'm doing what you've been urging me to do. God damn.